Greetings. Welcome back to the Cape Lead Revolution. This is Chachi once again, only this time coming to you from beautiful Marlborough, Connecticut. Here with a fellow podcast host, Erin Hatzikostas. And so, Erin, thank you so much for having me over, and welcome to the Cape Lead Revolution.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, invading my house, and making me drinks while you're here.
my absolute
Welcome
pleasure.
anytime.
So, huge thanks to Megan Thetford for introducing us. And so this is a collaboration about 2 or 3 months in the making from when she and I met and did our first introduction. So I've been so excited for this.
Yeah.
I'm a huge listener of your podcast, the Be Authentic podcast. We'll talk about that later.
Because.
I'm sorry, because.
That's okay. That's all right. Companies be authentic.
Yeah, be authentic. And so
podcast is because.
And I'm focusing on authenticity. And
yes,
so we can figure this out. But first, tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so Erin Hatzikostas. I'm not Irish or Greek. I just happen to be named after Ireland and married a Greek. I'm a Midwestern girl, born and raised in northern Michigan. Parents are both teachers. And one day, a good friend of mine came home from class and said, super excited, I found the career for you, Erin. It's high pay, low stress, and you have to be good at math. And you're the only person I know that's good at math. It's called an actuary. So this is back in the 90s, and of course I had no idea what the hell that was. And so I went to the library. No internet, right? Yes, millennials, we didn't have that. And found this booklet, and I was like, oh, there's a lot of companies in Connecticut. Did I mention them? It's a tiny bit naive, too. So I just, go with the flow. And got an internship with Aetna, which is a big healthcare company out here in Connecticut, and completely failed at the actuarial thing, so it is one of those careers with it. There's been many jokes about it, and they're all true, right? It's a little bit dry. Did not meet my Myers-Briggs. In fact, my first summer, I was with my intern class, and they had us do the Myers-Briggs assessment. And of course, like good actuaries, they compiled it and put it into different, into a graph, and we come in and there's a big screen and there's 4 quadrants and I'm all by myself. And so, I was smart enough to know that was a little bit of a sign. But I made the most of it. I pivoted. And the great thing about a company like Aetna, you have 50,000 now part of CVS, so hundreds of thousands of people, and it means there's hundreds of thousands of jobs. And I just was always very curious. I was pretty sharp. I was hardworking, but just had a lot of curiosity. And so every job I took was just I always tell people I'd get 50% uncomfortable. And so I take about half with me, but I jump into something totally different. And I did that, about every couple of years, and then about every 4 or 5 years. And then eventually, actually at a point in my time in my career where I really wanted to take a step back, my kids were 4 and 1. Mick was just a little toddler. Sick Mick. He was sick a lot. Not anything severe. He ended up having allergies. We found out later, but it was taking a toll on me. So I took a job with one of the divisions that we had just acquired, and I went from a team of 37 people I was leading to an individual contributor. But it was a big role. It was a strategic role. They wanted somebody to come in post acquisition and kind of figure out what are the big strategic synergies and opportunities that they hadn't sort of already figured out. But it's a classic example of where, do what's right for your career, but also do what's right for your own situation, even if it feels like a step back. I remember thinking, of course, had those thoughts like, okay, I want to get this new job. Are people going to look right in the address book and see I don't have this team under me and think, she sort of sold out or what have you. But I knew it was a place I needed to be at that time. I also knew it was a growing macro market, and I knew there were really good people. And so the story there goes, as things changed post-acquisition, a lot of the leaders leave from the acquired company, and every time somebody left, they kind of said, well, let's give it to Erin. And they did that so many times that I eventually became the CEO of that company. And it always sounds really sexy and stuff. I mean, I literally was COO, and then I got a call one day on vacation, and my boss said to me something to the effect, he did not say this probably, but this is what I heard. I'm being put onto a new project. You're going to be interim CEO until they figure out if there's anybody better out there. I was like, well, that kind of sucks.
Right.
But anyway, not to drag this on too long, I also decided, well, that's great. I can test it out too. And I did everything I could in those next 3 months to prove that I should lead it. I just basically pretended like I was the CEO and what would I do to turn this company around. And eventually got the job. And in 3 years, really had a storybook turnaround. Took the company from flat earnings for about 4 years and we tripled them.
Wow.
In the less than 3 years I was there. And our culture scores, our culture index went up 11 percentage points just in 1 year. So our overall engagement scores went up. And, you know, those two are highly correlated. So they weren't like I tackled two things.
Sure,
and we can talk about that. And then just when things got really good, I decided to leave. And it's just, you know, everybody's like, why? You know, I was ready for a new challenge. They were giving me lots of other big corporate jobs. And at the end of the day, and this is the nice thing for any of your women listening that are, you know, heading towards their 40s, like this is the great part. When you start to get into your 40s as a woman, you just start to know yourself so well, and this confidence in the quirks you have or why you make decisions the way you do. And I think by that time I had learned that complacency always sounded nice, but it's not me. And it's not that I'm this noble person, it's that I'm most driven when I have a challenge, when I have something I have to figure out, when I can do something new. And I saw the corporate world as this wonderful place and wonderful journey, but I knew that after doing what I did, not that there wasn't more to conquer, but it just wasn't that 50% uncomfortable. And so I left, and I'll tell that story really quick. So I actually retired, which you have as well.
Yes,
both
indeed.
In our 40s, retired. Like, high five for that.
Absolutely.
I had enough tenure there that it was technically a retirement. So we put out the retirement notice, and people are like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. And, you know, I had all these buckets of things. And culture and leadership and helping people with their career, and like I knew that was like something that was my biggest attribute, but I also hate doing things normal. And so as soon as I said that, I started to put that all into a bucket, right? Well, there's executive coaches, there's leadership companies, and that makes me anxious to feel like I'm going to go follow somebody's other path, even if there's like tons of money to be made. And so I didn't at first pursue it. And then after just a series of things and conversations, and I started to blog, and I had this epiphany one day, and it's really at the foundation of my message, which was I can do it. I can just do it my own way.
You bet.
And that's my message for everything. And so that's how I founded my company, Be Authentic Inc. It was like, well, what's all the crap I hate about career and leadership? Like, I'm not a big book reader. They're long. I hate going to too many of these politically correct panels and stuff. Like, what
it's
are
so stuffy and stodgy.
Stuffy and stodgy, and the words are so big, and it's like
communication, synergy.
Yeah, strategic read. So I basically said, well, let me take all the stuff that just isn't working for me or isn't working fast enough for people out there and do it my own way. And that's, you know, essentially how I got to the place of Be Authentic Inc. And then, you know, Because is an offshoot of that, which is the podcast.
And so I really enjoyed listening to the podcast with you and Nicole, and just kind of bantering back and forth. Did you come up with a style, or did you just kind of MSU just make shit up as you go along, or how did the podcast evolve, and what kind of format, or I guess what is like today's, I know it's going to evolve, what is kind of your end state for that, or what is your wish for any listener out there who listens to the Because podcast?
Yeah, it's funny because if you listen to it, you probably think it's mostly MSU, like make shit up, which is my formula for success. And in some ways, that's very much the truth. The reality is much more strategic, not to throw the buzzword, than that. Because, you know, I'm one of those people that I do kind of wing things, but I'm a big picture thinker, and I watch trends and stuff. And so there were a couple of things that I was watching. One, I saw a trend in podcasts where people, you know, much like in the TV world, you know, in the 80s, everybody was trying to do Oprah, right? And it was all just sort of the same style. And then, you know, sort of 90s, you started to see the reality TV shows, and you started to see different genres and mix. And I started to see that with podcasts, but only a tiny bit. So I started seeing like My Favorite Murderer, which is a podcast of just two chicks talking about like mass murderers and having this cult following. So one, it was recognizing that people kind of crave. I think that's why podcasts. I think that's why YouTube. Both of those do so well still, and will never completely be taken over by major media companies, because what happens when that happens is they start to become a little more scripted and stuff, and yes. People smell that out, right? I always say it like I can sniff out inauthenticity like that, and I think viewers too, and I think they're always going to be continuing to run in some their media towards more really authentic style. So that was part of it, sort of seeing that there was an opportunity to do that. Also, in the career space, just so much of it is the big words and things like that. And I thought, well, what if we just kind of shoot the shit about stuff and give our perspectives? And Nicole and I being so similar, but also very, very different, that I thought it was a great opportunity. What I never expected, and if you listen to Because, what's beautiful about it, because we have allowed ourselves also to MSU it a little bit, is that Nicole's journey is become so unique. And to be honest, so Nicole is my podcast co-host, Nicole Licata Grant. She is one of my most complex friends I've ever had. She is the most intelligent person you'll ever meet. She is also one of the wackiest zanies, and she's also she's got a lot of imperfections, like we all do.
You bet.
And I've always felt like she's kind of misunderstood, especially in the corporate world, because she is so different. But every conversation I have with her, I'm like, the world needs to know Nicole, because they want to hear it. And so what's been so wonderful is that, and we were talking about this a little bit, like, I think everybody that listens gets something different. I think some people are just going to listen to hear what happens to Nicole's life. Because we're literally watching, she's still working in the corporate world, but I'm also like kind of coaching her, because I think there's so much more that she can do. So that wasn't quite expected, that it would be this longitudinal journey too of both of us, because I also have an interesting journey now that I'm out in the entrepreneurial world. So I think everybody can kind of get something different from it, which is fun.
And there's part of it that just seems to be very cathartic as well. You guys should kind of get on there and have this airing of grievances, followed by feats of strength, for lack of a better term. Just get out there, and and for me, and we had this conversation to where the majority of my professional life, I joined the military when I was 18 years old, and no women in combat, no women on the front lines, and I chose a career field that was all male, only on the front lines, served in units where women couldn't be there. So for the vast majority of my career, it's not that I didn't think to ask women different stuff, they just weren't around.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I became a Chief Master Sergeant in the United States Air Force, to where I listened to my boss's wife give a speech, and she had this phenomenal stuff, and Pacific Air Forces paid for her to be a real champion for women's rights in our partner nation militaries.
Yeah. And
then she's like, Chachi, she goes, if you don't get a woman's opinion, you miss out on 50% of the opinions in the world.
Yeah.
Like absolutely mind blown. And that was absolutely huge for me. But one of the things that I like about your podcast, or I guess like what I think is a huge strength of both you and Nicole, is your EQ is incredibly high. And you seem to have, you're solidly planted in your internal locus of control, and you seem to, yourself very, very well, strengths and weaknesses. Yeah. She appears to know that as well. You guys have great conversations about how did that generally doesn't happen.
Yeah.
That doesn't, like, how did you get to this place? Because you seem to be remarkably self-aware. And there's so many people out there that I meet, men and women, who just need to be more self-aware for a lot of things and have honest conversations about themselves. How did that develop?
It's a great question. I mean, I think one, age, we're both in our 40s. I think it's also just, lack of ego. Even though both of us have had pretty good careers and kind of started from the bottom and have some pretty big accolades, we're very humble people. She grew up in New Haven, Connecticut, which is, especially in the 90s, a rough and tumble sort of city, and still to this day, pretty eclectic. Okay. Everything from Yale to, severely, impoverished and scary neighborhoods. And, I'm opposite. I came from, picture perfect, like northern Michigan, but very secluded too. And I think, so it's pretty hard to get like really bolster about yourself when you come from those kind of backgrounds. And then we've surrounded ourselves with people like each other, and obviously we have other friends that are the same. And then, you know, just now, I think part of it too is we probably had a lot of pent up thoughts. It's like you get to do a podcast. It's like when I left corporate and I wasn't expecting to even start this company or definitely not blog, and then I sat at hockey practice for a month and a half and I puked out, 37 pages in a Word document of, 20 different blog posts. And, this is a great lesson for people that are listening. Like, you might be like, I'm not a reader, or I'm not a writer, or I'm not a podcaster. It's like, if you have something you're passionate about, especially if it's been pent up, there's so many modes of communication. You'd be surprised. Like, I was a math major. I'm not a writer. But when I sat down with things that I had accumulated and sort of held up, right? There's only so much you can write about when you've got corporate compliance over your shoulder. It's amazing what's in there. And I think that's a little bit for Nicole and I. I mean, we definitely talk about the day-to-day, but Lord, do we have material, sort of saved up for, 30 plus years. So.
What would you say as far as your leadership journey? And I'm one of the people to where, and I've said it a million times on my podcast, I don't care about leadership anymore. And it doesn't sound great at face value. Like, the two greatest compliments I can give in contemporary American society is, he's a good dude, or she's an awesome chick. Right. So I hashtag good dudership. So I focus on good dudership, right? So like how can we treat people better? Not in leadership, just have better conversations, better interactions. And it seems like that's just I guess inherently what you did. They just kept giving you different opportunities. You rise to the occasion and succeed. Yeah. So where does some of this, just in all that success, you're talking about staying humble. Where does this humility come from? Perhaps you're a small town girl from northern Michigan, right? But at the same time, people look around, and you're a CEO of like a Fortune 50 company, yes?
Oh, I was a CEO within a Fortune 50. We had about 1,000 employees in the company.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
But so 1,000 employees, you're the CEO, and yet you stayed so humble, and you just wanted to come back, and you hung it all up to start your podcast, and then also be wife and be mom and focus on some of those things. How does that humility take hold?
I think it's a great question, and I'm thinking about it. There are the normal pieces, like the small town girl and parents and who I'm surrounded by and things like that. I think a part of it, to be frank, is back to like, I don't like to do normal either.
Nice.
And quite frankly, being humble at the executive ranks is not normal. And,
fair.
So I think that was a little bit of a tailwind for me. So I think not being normal and sort of bucking the trends, one of the things I always talk about, like one of my things I stood on was communications, like the corporate communications is especially in a company, in a big company, there's so many resources and so many templates and communications people that can do stuff for you and scratch your back and write your stuff. And I didn't do that. I mean, I remember one time we had this massive reorganization. They sort of forced us to relook at all of our businesses. Huge consultants came in. And then, of course, there was this, well-orchestrated cascade of all the announcements and all the things that were changing over like 2 months, which talk about like poor employees, right? Sitting through it for 2 months, there's going to be this dance, which is like terrifying. And everybody had their pretty picture and they had all the big words. And it's like, nobody freaking reads that shit. I wrote my own. And my team knows my voice, and I talk to them like I'm talking to you, and they read our stuff and they understood what was going on. So I mean, I think it's it's being different. I also think it's just I knew it's what worked. I knew it's what brought me the best talent, because no matter how much you're a leader of an organization, you're still also reporting to somebody looking for like you are also a consumer of leadership, and I knew what I wanted. And I knew that the best talent was looking for somebody like me that was approachable and humble and funny and, didn't necessarily follow the rules. And I mean, it's not that hard, people. Like, you get the best talent. That is the game. Period. End of story.
Right.
Like, get the best talent. Obviously, don't fuck it up and like ruin them and have a bad culture. But and then you can sit back and like watch it all happen. So I think it was, it was a little bit of heart, a little bit of mind.
It's funny, in the military, we have this thing where it says, mission first, people always. But then people inevitably have the question, what is more important, the mission or the people? And it'd be bad. And I think to your point, I was like, hey, if we focus on the people will take care of the mission.
Yeah, and that also brings up a thought too. I remember when we were doing really well and had such a strong reputation, and there were certainly some leaders. In fact, this started to really come out when I was interviewing my successor, right? So I had a number of people that I was part of the panel to interview to come in and take over when I retired. And there was definitely a mindset which was, well, yeah, of course everybody comes to work for you. You're so nice, and right, like you must be easy on them, and right, like you must just focus on the people first, not the mission. And I would say to them, first and foremost, people want to win. Yep. I don't care if you're in the military or you're in the corporate world.
Amen.
And so when you ask that question, it's like, it is kind of a chicken and egg question, because you can get great people and you can treat them really well, but if their missions are failing, they don't want to be there either. Or if their businesses are not growing and succeeding, not only because academically they're like, oh, I might lose my job if we don't do well, but like they want to win. They want to win the customers. They want to have good accolades. They want to be part of a winning team. So I think it's very much a chicken and egg, and I think it's tough to say which one, because you got to get those good people, but those good people want to win, and you've got to make sure that you have them positioned to win the mission.
And it's funny, when you were talking about doing things differently and kind of going against normal, one of the coolest things I listened to your podcast was when you started adjusting your out-of-office assistant. Explain to us a little bit about that, because you made phenomenal points with this, that I've changed how I communicate certain things. Yeah. So tell us, like, the out-of-office assistant.
Well, I love the out-of-office example, not just because of what it is, but it's such a great example of, it's the small things. Like, one of the talks I give is that we are so programmed to get big, complex issues in the world, like gender diversity or like, lack of engagement at work, these massive issues. And then we try to solve them with these massive solutions, right? It's got to be just as complex. And the reality is there are so many micro steps that not only leaders can do, but everyday people, because that happens all the time. Especially when I give talks and they're like, well, what if I don't have people reporting to me? And it's like, no, you can influence it too. So the out-of-office example is a great example of that. Is one day I was, I think we were leaving maybe for a long weekend or something, and I had been writing more of my communication, so I'd been getting bolder and bolder with just writing Erin talk, and I wrote my out of office like that. It was like, leaving on a much needed, break up to Vermont with the family. I'll get back to you on Monday or something like that. And what I found was not only people, like, that's just, like, when you see that, it's like so right? You're like, yeah, you do it, girl. Like, you go be with that family. Like, you get re-energized. Yeah. And then they, of course, when they go to do their out of office, not only does it energize people, but it obviously gives them permission. Yes. And it's just like little things like that. And you can use your out of office, like, if you're going, like, you're going on a client meeting tomorrow, like, right, like going to meet with one of my favorite clients, because they're going to see it, right? Because they're going to inherently send you some email about some detail, right? So I would even do it when I was on work trips. Contrary, most of my colleagues at the executive ranks wouldn't do an out of office at all, because it was sort of this cultural, like, I'm never out of the office, which is total bullshit, because first of all, then your people are so confused. They don't know where you are and if they should respond. And so I took it the other direction. And I always say, people follow, they respect authority, but at the end of the day, they follow authenticity. And it's so contagious. And, there's so many little things you can do. And quite frankly, my team, we ended up creating a culture at my company that was optimal to me from a culture perspective. I thought I was supposed to inspire people, and I finally learned that actually the best thing you can do is create an inspiration platform. And platform in quotes is really creating like a system. The flywheel is what I always use as an analogy, like those little plastic, we pull the zip tie and the thing goes, the plastic thing that goes flying. Right. That was probably like the only toy we had back in the 70s, right? And as a leader, you just have to pull that, like, every so often. And so we would do just the smallest things, like we would start our meetings and then subsequent, we call them team huddles, with slow down and inspire. And we'd spend the first 10 minutes instead of like what we used to do, which was like, okay, issue number 1, this consulting company's, mad at us for blah, blah, blah. What are we going to do? We would just spend 10 minutes like sharing stories. And a lot of it was leadership best practices. Oh, my team did this. Or we're now, sharing this new newsletter. Or, sometimes it was, I ran a half marathon last weekend, person on my team just, got a clear on their cancer. I mean, it was like across the board. And once we started the culture of doing that and others did that, I mean, every operational meeting, all of a sudden, new things would pop up. Like, all of a sudden they would have Motivational Monday and they were starting to put out quotes. And as a leader, when you start to see stuff like that happening, that you had, I don't want to say nothing to do with, but you're like 2 degrees of separation from it, right? Because you're just created the platform. It's the most beautiful thing in the world. And that's how you create systemic change, so that people can just do small little things and keep it going. And then you just sit back and watch it happen.
That's amazing. And okay, so with that, as we carry into our first break, so one quick question. So like the one repetitive question I've been asking on my podcasting, and this is the only like repetitive I try and do, is that if you can give one piece of advice, or what is your best piece of advice to give to any aspiring leader out there, or just someone who wants to find success, however that shapes out, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, aspiring leaders, you got to lead before you're handed, the title. Period. End of story. The best leaders I ever came across were people that were in my organization, didn't have a team, were given a big project, would get people in a room, would fire them up, would put together processes, get them excited, and they were not doing anybody's annual review. They weren't, paying anybody's paycheck. Breaking into it is always that chicken and egg. People are like, well, how do I get there? Because I've never had an opportunity in it. You have opportunities all the time. And, the best way to shine is to figure out how to inspire people and lead them before, you have the whip, if you will.
And for me, a lot of it's just the mindset. What people can view as a challenge is probably that opportunity.
Yeah.
They're just not viewing it through that lens.
Yeah.
And whether, like for me, I'm all about positivity and just looking at things through a positive lens. I guess perhaps I'm a little bit naive, I think, along that way.
Okay.
But at the same time, it's helped me succeed.
Yeah.
And so I'm absolutely on board with that.
Yeah, and then for leaders, once you've broken in, stay humble and freaking get over yourself. I mean, that's one of the talks I give. Like, get over yourself. Spend more time impressing your people than your boss. And it doesn't happen often, and it's hard to do. But I guarantee you, if you do that, the results will come, and then you don't have to worry about impressing your boss, because they like it when your business does well, right? Like, that makes a one-on-one meeting pretty easy. The numbers are doing well, the employee scores. Too many people get into executive ranks, and it becomes how do I not get fired?
Sure.
Instead of how do I have a purpose? How do I lead? How do I be different? And how do I impress my people?
For that goes back to the Office Space quote. When he has his meeting with the Bobs, he's like, you can do this, but that only makes a person work just enough not to get fired.
Yeah.
And I can't believe how prophetic that has ended up being, going forward. So awesome. We'll pick this up. We'll talk more about authenticity in the next part. So we'll be right back here on the Cape Lead Revolution with Erin Hatzikostas. Welcome back from break. We're here back with Erin. She and I were having a little discussion on break, and just some of the notes. I wasn't answering texts or sending emails, just taking notes as we were going through this. But I love your quote of slow down and inspire. So what does that mean to you, and how does that play out for anybody watching or listening out there?
Yeah, so this was all inspired. We had an incredible leadership company called Alchemy Group. Sandy Sullivan leads that group, and Allie Wick is her co-founder. And, that's one thing I have to say. If you're really trying to build the culture, even if you're a cool chick like me, you need help. You need to invest. And so we invested in them. And I think I'm not alone. Like, usually us people that are successful, us overachievers, tend to work and move pretty fast, right? And so one of the foundational principles that they use at Alchemy is this concept of slowing down to go fast. And they use an incredible analogy, which is to think about it like pedal strokes on a bike. So we all been on a bike. If you're in gear 1, it goes really fast, but you're not necessarily going anywhere. You're not going anywhere quickly. And so the power really comes in getting it to gear 3, to gear 4. And slowing down and then really figuring out what are those pedal strokes, especially as you rise higher and higher. Your job is to get rid of, the gear 1 and
Sure.
only do gear 4 and 5. And that was something that was really, was hard for me because I've been running fast my entire life. But it was really impactful. And so we just kind of carried that through to our meetings, and to a lot of what we talked about was, slow down to go fast, and how do you focus on, those powerful pedal strokes.
See, and that's just a good application of power. You can do lesser, less powerful strokes and do a lot more of them, but you may not get anywhere.
Yep.
But if you can step back a little bit, reassess, take powerful steps to go forward, and that's what's really going to propel you.
Yeah. And if you think about it, like, unfortunately, we are served up gear 1s, email, IMs, the age that we're in where everybody expects that fast is possible because of technology and so easy. And so, unfortunately, like, we're handed bikes that are definitely every morning set to gear 1.
Yep.
Even if you had them at gear 7 when you went to bed, like, they're at gear 1. And so it's like, it's a daily thing. Every single day you have to fight against that bike being in gear 1, and the email is a to-do list. And, and also one of the things I talk about too is you have to change your addiction. Okay. So, it's so easy, especially when we're young whippersnappers, it's so easy to get addicted to checking things off your to-do list and having the clean email inbox and feeling like you did a lot of things that day. But it's an addiction that you have to change to succeed. And so how do you get addicted to, when you have, something really powerful done? How do you get more excited about different levers than you had in the past? And it's a hard thing to do, and it takes practice. I mean, that's the other thing we always talked about. Sure. Practice. Like, you may come in the office and be like, I'm hitting gear 4, and you may do gear 1 all day. That's okay. Like, the next day, get the bike back up, and you just keep practicing, and eventually, you're gonna be changed.
And that's, for me, as you're saying this stuff, for me, it's just, you need to ask yourself, what does success mean to you?
100%.
And it's not
to
necessarily
you,
inside the confines of the workspace,
To you, 100%. But you even have to start within your job.
Right.
I've had this conversation actually with Nicole on the podcast, when she had her meltdown in Spain. If you listen to the the famous Spanish meltdown, which is really, if you want to bop around, it's a good one to start with. A 2-part series where she goes to Spain, and what a disaster. And in fact, we didn't record one night when we first touched base. We sort of cheated on it, and it was even worse. But God bless her for sort of being so vulnerable and letting us kind of learn on her back. Now I'm going to forget my point. We were talking about
the success inside.
Oh, success. Yeah. So one of the questions I asked her was, what does your leadership define your success? You run this huge foundation. And she's like, oh my God, like, it's, it's a really big, noble thing.
This big nebulous kind of concept.
But if you asked her what she worried about 99% of her days, it was, responding to an email, editing a communication. It was, and look, it's hard because she also does, has a small area, a small department with 2 people. And so I get it. But, first you have to, like, think about what is success that your company or your boss, because so often we think it's, that we're working hard and we look disheveled and we're staying late, and it's like, nobody cares about that. They care about results, and they care about, the output and quality and all of that. So you have to start there first, and then you're absolutely right. I mean, then there's a whole bigger conversation, like, what is success? What do you, the phrase I've been using lately is, Nicole said to me, you can have it all is bullshit. And I actually said to her, well, I disagree. It's just a matter of how do you define having it all.
You bet.
And you need to make your own definition, which is, kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny, right before I retired, I'd kind of come to this conclusion. Somebody gave me advice. It says, you need to run out of career before you run out of family. And I thought that was so profound.
Yeah.
And like, you're gonna go every day and you're gonna grind, and you get back home, you're probably still mentally grinding on that stuff, and you're sending a text or an email here and there, or doing whatever. You never truly disconnect, and you're not in the moment. Like we're talking about Dr. Janelle McCauley, like she goes on talking about mindfulness. So what did you do and what do you do right now to make sure that you're finding success on your terms and in your definition?
Yeah, it's been such an interesting place for me, because so if I look at, I get people all the time, right? How's the new business going? Right? Most frequently asked question. And, even now I've been into it, 10 months, but especially back in the beginning, I was like, great. And then I would be like, am I freaking lying? Because I'm not making any, I'm not making any money, or, whatever I'm making, I'm reinvesting. And so I had a really hard time with that, because I almost felt like I was lying. And I actually wrote a blog article about the 10 things that I've sort of learned I didn't know that I didn't know when I changed. And one of them was that you do have to change your own definition of success. So, I literally say out loud on a regular basis, or to myself, I love my life. I never used to say that. And I had a great life. I was making tons of money, and so I think you've got to, the most basic thing is like, how often do you say to yourself, I love my life? And, I've redefined my success, and people are like, oh, you don't need so much money. It's like, well, yeah, but I'm also going to make more money than I made before. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
I just have the patience and I have the confidence of that bridge that's going to get me there. And so why not have a really freaking good time while you're doing it? And so if you can have a good time doing what you're doing, I call it ikigai. Have you ever heard of the term ikigai?
Yeah. Purpose of life.
Purpose of life, and it's it's the most beautiful Venn diagram there is.
Absolutely.
Intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can make money at. And I truly, truly believe every single person can find an ikigai, and that what you make money at isn't just like taking a huge cut in pay. You can actually make as much, if not more, than in your big job. And so, I think defining your own success and having the guts to walk the bridge. That's what I always just keep seeing. I'm on a rickety-shickety bridge, but I've seen a lot of other people have crossed the bridge and they made it over alive. I know that if I stop halfway and turn back around, then I won't be successful. But if I have the guts to just keep going over, and there's going to be a few places where there's boards out and it's going to shake a little bit more and my heart's going to pound. But when I get to the other side, I'm never coming back.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And I love ikigai, the best Venn diagram that I've seen, because there's some that kind of abandon where there's only 3 circles overlapping, and they kind of leave those blank.
I haven't seen that.
And but they're the ones that do have it completely filled in. You can see what happens when 2 circles overlap. Mm-hmm. You can see when 4 circles overlap, and then when only 3 circles overlap, that one area, it tells you what's missing here. Yeah. And so I'm a huge fan. I've got a podcast on ikigai. Absolutely love that entire concept. But now I kind of want to get into authenticity. Yeah. And your struggle, your goal to make authentic leaders. Yeah. So how did that start, and what does this mean for you and the people you want to teach?
Yeah, it all started when I said I was going to retire, and everybody said, what are you going to do? And I didn't know. And at least 50%, if not 75% of the emails and the conversations use that word, or some very close form. I'm going to miss your authentic leadership. I'm going to miss, you're such an approachable leader. And it was like one of those epiphanies where at first I was like, well, that's super easy. Like, I can't believe so many people are going to, and then of course, because I'm also a consumer of leadership, I was like, yeah, you're right. It's not very usual. It's not very normal. And it was funny, actually, when I was forming the business name, I had 2 words, and then I crowdsourced it out to my mom group, of course, in text, right? Like 7 or 8 of my moms. And, it all came back to authenticity, thank God. Cause I think they picked the right word. And that's what we're exploring, because we talk a lot about it, and it's a lot of people are like, it's, be yourself. And I'm like, no, it's, especially at work, it's way deeper. It's way more than that. And so I'm changing it all the time. And, first time I gave a keynote presentation, I basically said, here's the formula, which was, humility, humor, and storytelling. And then some guy kind of called me out in a nice way. It was like, well, I'm, those things are not me. And I'm like, you're right. That's hypocritical for me. So now my talk is like, here's the formula. Here's my recipe. but you have to find your own recipe.
You bet.
And then you asked me the great question when we talked a while back, what if the authentic self just sucks? And it's like, yeah, then they, and if it sucks and they're not self-aware, then we need to find a way to get them out, because that's what's ruining, corporate America. And maybe they're better, running their own financial company and, doing numbers behind the scene or something. I don't know the answer to that. So I don't think it, it's like anything. One solution can never, like one trait and one thing.
Amen.
But at the same time, I firmly believe that if we can empower more authenticity in the workplace, I think it can make a massive dent in the two biggest issues I see. To me, the two macro issues that I at least watch and see the most are, one, the lack of diversity in the workplace, and of course that's gender diversity. It's all kinds of diversity as well, and I think it's the lack of engagement. And I gave a talk on this, and when I was prepping for it, a friend said, "Well, what does lack of engagement mean?" And at first I went, because there's a study that's done every year on this, and I went back to this study and I was like, wait a minute, why am I looking this up? It means that people don't give a shit about their jobs. Like, that's a problem.
You bet.
And I think authenticity, on the diversity angle, I'm a big believer that the best talent's actually opting out. So we don't talk about this. We talk about how do we bring these women through all these things, and we try to get them to sort of change for the job. And I'm like, no, that's not going to work. They should change the job.
You bet.
If they can know and feel empowered that they can go in, that was my story. Like, I didn't like traveling that much. Like, I didn't want to be on an airplane all the time. Did I get on an airplane? Absolutely. Did I find good right hands that went to customer meetings for me and stuff? And did I say no to a lot of things? Yes. And so I think by empowering authenticity, it's gender neutral, but advantage women, because I think more and more women are opting out for fear of compromising kind of their family, their health, and kind of who they are. But if we can really teach them, no, you can actually change the job. You can come in with all of those things, and you're going to have a greater followership. And just like maybe the dude that did it before who wasn't great at everything, and then found somebody to supplement that, you can do the same thing. Like, find your best traits. And I knew that for me, my best traits were different than everybody else's, and I needed to supplement them. I'm not good at project management. I didn't like to get on a plane all the time. Well, great. Let me get a command of people around me that are good at that.
I can't do that.
And then I think on the engagement side, where people just don't give a shit about their job and aren't happy, I mean, it all comes down to trust. And trust is such a big factor to engagement. And, Harvard and a professor there has defined trust, and authenticity is one of the 3 pillars of that triangle of trust. And it's really powerful. So I don't think it can solve everything, but I think it's a big comet that can come through and bust up, some of these big problems. And like I talked about before, it's also very simple.
And as when you and I spoke first time back in August, I haven't been able to shake authenticity and what it means to be authentic. And I think one of the first comments you kind of brought is you can smell out the bullshit quickly.
100%.
And so when someone, and I want people to be authentic, and maybe their authentic self is an asshole, for lack of a better term, but teach them how to understand that so they can build their team of trust around them, and they can use these different people, and those are their strengths. But you have to start with having, I think, the tough conversation with yourself. And
I'd rather have them be an asshole in every room. The worst people are the people that you think is a great leader, and then they go around the corner to grab a cocktail, or to go talk with the hotel employee, and then they're somebody different. A great Jennifer Rudolph Walsh. You probably haven't heard of her because she's very behind the scenes, but she represents some big names like Brene Brown and Oprah and Abby Wambach in her new book. She's she's an agent, and I heard her on the Goop podcast. It was like a year ago. It was one of those where I was like, this one doesn't sound very interesting. And I was like in my car with my fist pumping, this is my woman. And it's actually we all have our big audacious goals. Mine's to be represented by her. She said 2 things. She said, and she's a very outspoken, New Jersey, New York woman. And she's like, first of all, I only represent people that are the same in every room. And And that like was so stuck with me because that actually defined what had pissed me off. It was those leaders that actually were different in different rooms. You know, if you're going to be an asshole, just be an asshole in every room. Don't surprise people or put up this fake thing. And obviously people that are the same in every room, which really means that they're good people and inspiring people, right? And that, you know, treat the hotel worker, you know, the same as they would treat their executive boss. So that really stuck with me. You know, so I guess to turn it into a lesson, like, you know, if you're gonna lead with compassion and this concept of authenticity, like be the same in every room, be consistent, don't be different. The other thing she said that I'm just, because I freaking loved it, she was like, her other quote was, you know, everybody hates a fake, but I really fucking hate fakes. Like, oh no, it was phony. Everybody hates a phony, but I really fucking hate phonies. And yeah, I was like, this is my woman. This is my woman. So I've tagged her a few times on LinkedIn. She hasn't quite found me yet, but
Yet.
She'll find me one of these days.
So, man, so again, huge, I could sit here and talk all day about authenticity, but as we kind of wind down the podcast and kind of move into this, moving forward, what are your hopes and dreams for everyone's understanding of authenticity?
I mean, I think first and foremost that it's so powerful. You know, so I think so many decision makers and people of influence need to have the business case first.
Sure.
And I think there's a lot of academic, you know, Harvard and some of the studies they've done, the neuroscience of trust, which is a great study, and then linking that to authenticity. I also am a great business case. Like, I firmly believe that first of all, I didn't get lucky. We didn't triple earnings with luck. And it was, you know, my authentic leadership at the heart of what we did. And there was a lot of tentacles to that yielded great results. So, like, take that as a data point.
You bet.
So I think that's first. Like, know that there's a business case. Like, this isn't all just like kumbaya and flowers and roses. Like, there is a business case for authentic leadership. I think the second thing is everybody can inspire it, like we talked about before. My team, the things they would do, by the end of my tenure and my time leading the company, I would sit in meetings, I'm not kidding, I'd be like, I'm a really shitty leader. Like, these guys are, like, the things they would be doing, like, I would feel like a sloth. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, all the things they would share and best practices, and you know, when you start feeling like the crappiest leader in the room, but you're a pretty good leader, like,
right.
That's a great feeling.
Yeah, like, how amazing.
So no, I mean, I would tell my people that all the time, like, you inspire the shit out of me. So know that even if you're an individual contributor, you feel like you don't make a difference, like, authenticity is extremely contagious, and can be done at all levels. And then I think the third thing is, you know, especially for women, but this is not just for women. I've had men on my webinars before that were like, yeah, I hold myself back because I've got one guy, you know, my wife has mental health issues and we have a family. And so I think he also was like, yeah, I've been holding myself back in my career because I can't compromise. I've got, you know, the stuff. And gosh, you know, make the job your own.
Right.
Make the job your own. Don't change for the job. You can actually change it, and you can do as good, if not better, by bringing your authentic self, and then, you know, figuring out where you do suck a little bit. You know, you're not as strong, and fill in the pieces. Abby Wambach has a great quote. For those of you guys don't know Abby is she is the all-time leading goal scorer in soccer, men and women. She's an Olympic and World Cup winner and gold medalist, and now has retired, and wrote Wolfpack. She's married to Glennon Doyle.
Yep.
If you don't know Glennon, one of the most beautiful writers ever. She has a quote that I don't have in front of me, so it goes something like this: no offense to men, but men have been allowed to rule the world imperfectly since the beginning of time. It's now time for the women to know that they can, you know, imperfectly rule it. I totally bastardize it, but something to that effect, you know, which is the point is nobody's perfect.
Right.
It's just a matter of confidence and being able to get in there and know you've got to supplement yourself and you've got to do it your own way, and you can do it. So don't hold yourself back. You can have it all, and you can define it your own way.
And at least bring up just a different style of imperfection as we're all trying.
Absolutely.
You know, shoot for the stars, take the moon, all that kind of stuff.
All that good stuff.
So where can our viewers and listeners find you?
Yeah, so I would start at beauthenticinc.com. It's just the letter B. I'm going to put that in your show notes. Beauthenticinc.com. I think I've been around long enough, and maybe a Google search will come up. I should know these things. I have some fun, free stuff on there. I have what kind of dog at work are you? If you're a quiz kind of person, you want to go through, and it's, there's some Chris Farley pictures. There's some funny stuff that's, true sort of Be Authentic Inc. and Erin style. So you can take that quiz, and actually the quiz tells you what kind. There's 5 different dogs, and actually I give you a customized list of blogs to read of mine and things that you can do to become to fill in some of your gaps. So it's actually real, but it's pretty funny.
That's awesome.
And the dogs are super cute. So you get a cute picture of a dog. Who doesn't like a cute picture of a dog? So that's on there. I also have a free career guide. I, sort of labor of love, put the 10 strategies that help me rise without selling my soul and become a CEO. And it's a 20-some page kind of PDF. So it's 10 strategies, and then each strategy has 5 practical steps. So everything's awesome. Bite-sized, and so 50 practical steps in there that you can do. That's free. I'd love for you also to listen to Because. It's just the letter B, then CAUSE with Erin Nicole. Not only are we a podcast, we also are on, our big mission is to take over all the boring, stuffy women's conferences, or quote unquote ladies conferences as we call them, and go live. And we actually did our first in New York City last month. So we're doing super fun stuff. We're making people feel really uncomfortable, nice. But coming out laughing and having a great time. We, basically took the 20 things we hated about women's conferences and demolished them all. So it's got some Lizzo reworded stuff. We've got some funny videos, and then a lot of it is just us improving. And it's not us being comedians, because we're not. We actually give advice like we do on the podcast. So it's got substance, but we're also pretty funny. So if you listen to the podcast, you can also hear where we start to come, hopefully, to a city near you. We're starting to work on our strategy and being out there. And then, I'm all over Be Authentic Inc. on Instagram and Facebook, and you find Erin Hatzikostas on LinkedIn, and just all the places, wherever you hang out. I'm probably there, or Be Authentic Inc. is probably there.
You bet. So this is absolutely huge. And again, if you're hearing this, you again, for CAPE, right, for the CAPE Lead Revolution, we heard the caring. You have to be authentic. You have to care about You have to care about your family or your team. You're talking about the alignment, all these 50 different bite-sized steps that you can do to help you find success and align what you need based off of what you care. Reaching out, talking to different people, you're going to get different perspectives. That's a beauty part of podcast. You can gain different perspectives and hear those things. And then lastly, what are our expectations? Whether we have expectations of each other to be authentic, our expectations for communication and understanding, our expectations for success, and who helps define success. So this is awesome. Erin, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks,
this is huge. One final cheers.
Cheers.
This has been too long in the making. Oh, this is phenomenal.
Awesome.
And we'll catch you back here next time on the Cape Lead Revolution. This is Chachi reminding you to always educate, anticipate, and dominate. We'll talk to you later.